Great. So why don't we go ahead and get started? I'm Nathan Shetler from the University of Chicago, and I want to welcome everyone, both in person as well as those of you joining us remotely, to the inaugural ITM Grand Rounds. This is a series that has been discussed and planning has been in progress for the last year, so we're very happy to have this be the inaugural event. Today we are focusing on ITM 3.0 and going to have an overview and a discussion that is led by the three principal investigators. That includes Lainie Ross, who's a professor in the Department of Pediatrics and an associate director of the McLean Center for Clinical Ethics at the University of Chicago. Julian Solway, who's a professor of medicine at the University of Chicago and dean for translational medicine, and Josh Jacobs, who is the chairman of the Department of Orthopedics here at Rush Medical College. So welcome, and with that, I'll hand things over.
Well, welcome everybody, and particular thanks to Nate Shetler and Raghuveer Mira for organizing the new ITM Grand Rounds seminar series. The title of ITM 3.0 is Advancing Health Toward Health Equity in Metropolitan Chicago. We have leaders of this program who are listed here. The folks in maroon are from the University of Chicago, and the folks in green are from Rush. We are both partner institutions leading the ITM, and we're delighted that we have 4 other partner institutions: Advocate Aurora Healthcare, Loyola University Chicago, the Illinois Institute of Technology, or Illinois Tech, and North Shore University Health System, who all collaborate and partner with us, and there's great and wonderful interchange. The ITM, or Institute for Translational Medicine, is one of about 60 NIH or NCAT's National Center for Advancing Translational Science funded clinical and translational science award programs, or CTSAs, and they call each of the awardee groups a hub. At the highest level, our mission is to speed the translation of new knowledge into improved health. These little Google symbols across the country show where those approximately 60 CTSA hubs are. There are 3 in Chicago, including the University of Chicago Rush Hub, and the Northwestern Hub, and the UIC Hub. The major objectives of the Institute for Translational Medicine are now and have always been to train diverse teams to do clinical and translational research, to intertwine the doing of that research with the delivery of healthcare wherever possible, to engage our community in all aspects of that research, to integrate all populations into clinical and translational research so that results are relevant to all the people of the United States and hopefully beyond. To optimize the methods and processes used in clinical and translational science so that we can do research studies faster, better, cheaper, and truly accelerate the productivity of the research enterprise. All of this requires extensive and comprehensive informatics, and so another key aspect of the ITM mission is to provide those informatics capabilities. We like to show the organization of ITM on this color wheel, in which each of the collections of kinds of activities that we do is, for example, engaging community and collaboration, focusing on research methods, career and training advancement, and so on. We like to show these different areas on a color wheel in which the colors blend seamlessly into the other colors of the other areas of focus. We call these clusters. The metaphor is that there are no barriers between the folks dealing with network capacity, interacting with the rest of the CTSA consortium, those other 60 organizations, and the folks who focus mostly, on informatics. I mean, there it is. The notion is that it's not that people think only about informatics and don't think about training and don't think about community and collaboration, for example. In this slide that I hope you'll be able to see, and I'm not going to go through it in detail, these balloons call out many of the new programs that we are going to talk about in more detail in the rest of this session. And so perhaps you'll have a chance to see these slides online, and of course we can always answer any more questions about them. The leadership organization of ITM is shown on this sort of a bullseye kind of a slide. The group in the middle we call ITM Central. They include the three ITM directors, Lainie Ross, Josh Jacobs, and me. Dorianne Miller, who is ITM Director for Health Equity Integration. Jerry Stacy, the Administrative Director of ITM. Sarah Saratella, Communications Director of ITM. And Julie Darnell, who is Evaluation Director. In the surrounding circle are the leaders of each of those 8 clusters of activities and focus areas that are shown on the way outside, and many, but of course not all, of the content experts who are especially involved in ITM are shown in the outermost circle. The key thing about this is that we have leadership drawn from all the ITM institutions, and so we try to be very, very collaborative and interactive. We are also highly privileged to be advised by 4 advisory groups whose memberships are shown here. They include a Community Advisory and Review Council, a Patient Advisory Board, an industry advisory board, and an external advisory board comprised of principals from other CTSAs and 2 local community scientists who have just joined the external advisory board, and we are looking forward especially to working with them as well. And last, ITM clinical facilities cover Chicagoland. Here is a map on the right that shows in the diamonds all the outpatient facilities, in the Google dropped symbols, dropped pins, the hospitals associated with the 5 large clinical organizations that comprise ITM. And here is a zoomed out larger view emphasizing the extensive involvement that Advocate Aurora has in Wisconsin as well as Northeast Illinois. So you're never far from an ITM-related facility. All right, so that's a little bit about how ITM has been. What about going forward? Well, you know, every 5 years we compete for the large CTSA grant that provides most of the funding for ITM. We also have generous institutional support from all our institutions, and especially University of Chicago and Rush. And in the renewal that we submitted, about a year ago, we got an impact score of 12. Now that's on the scale of 10 is perfect and 90 is horrible. And so it's a near perfect score, which means that what we had planned to do was well received by the reviewers. It's good. The budget for all of this is about $51 million over 5 years. And so you can see that this is a considerable sized effort. Our emphasis on health equity is stimulated not only by the need, but by a formalization of evaluation of health equity needs by the Chicago Department of Public Health in their report issued in March 2020 called Healthy Chicago 2025. This is their plan, CDPH's plan, to close the citywide racial life expectancy gap, which has been striking. This graph illustrates the expected life expectancy among 4 demographic groups in 2012 and 5 years later in 2017. You can see that for Asians and Latinx people and Black non-Latinx people who live in Chicago, the life expectancy has been going down. For white folks living in Chicago, it didn't go down. In fact, it went up a little bit in that period, widening a gap between Black and white non-Latino people to almost 9 years. Astounding and unacceptable. The drivers of that gap are principally chronic disease and gun-related homicide, but also infant mortality, HIV and infectious disease, opioid overdose, and minor contributions from other causes. Now, the Chicago Department of Public Health, and indeed the National Academy of Medicine, recognizes the tremendous importance of not only focusing on disease and disease injury and mechanisms of disease and treating disease, but instead we have to move upstream to tackle the root causes that contribute to disease. Things like social factors, institutional inequities, living conditions, including stress and psychological conditions, and environmental conditions. Indeed, if we summarize these as social, environmental, psychological, and the behavioral factors that are induced as a result of all of the exposure to adverse social, environmental, and psychological stresses, we lump those together and use the term sociome to describe all of those social, environmental, psychological, and behavioral factors that are upstream of health, but are such important determinants of health. Now, we've adopted that term sociome to acknowledge that many different social, environmental, behavioral, and psychological aspects of lived lives actually do influence health. And like the other biological omes, genome, proteome, and such, to emphasize the big data and computable nature of all of these factors together. So what is the sociome? It not only includes the traditional social determinants of health, like education, access and quality, healthcare, built environment, social context, economic stability, and such, but goes beyond that to consider other factors that aren't traditional social determinants of health. In the realm of psychological, one is exposed to street violence, and certainly that's stressful. But is there a loving home that might counter partially some of the effects of that stress? Perhaps one is exposed to air pollution, but is one also exposed to lots of sunshine with its various good and dangerous, think melanoma, consequences? When we think about exercise, is that exercise heavy labor or something enjoyable like dance? Together, this is all sociome. So we think it is critical to account for sociome factors when performing clinical research, because sociome factors interact with human biology to exacerbate or even primarily cause disease and injury. And they certainly disrupt the social, environmental, and psychological securities that are required for best health. Indeed, adverse sociome factors are often manifestations of structural racism. Here's an example of why we need to think about sociome factors. So imagine we're doing a clinical trial of a new inhaled corticosteroid for asthma. Some of you know I'm a lung doctor. I think about asthma a lot. So we're going to do an efficacy trial. Does this new inhaled corticosteroid work? That's the question. Some of the participants live here. That's Downton Abbey. And they respond wonderfully to the inhaled corticosteroid. Seems to work great. Some of the participants in the study live here. This is a highly allergen-infested, those are a bunch of cockroaches in the bathroom, moldy, high allergen inflammatory environment for an asthmatic. And they don't respond very well at all to the inhaled corticosteroid. So remember, the trial is done to determine, does the drug work? Clearly, there are two diametrically opposed answers, and if only folks who lived in Downton Abbey participated, the answer is yes, the drug works. If only folks who lived in environments like on the right, the answer is no. Clearly, there will be some proportion of participants from either one, and so depending on how many, that will determine the apparent yes or no net answer. clearly this is not a useful thing if the study only includes folks from Downton Abbey, and we don't account for exposures in everybody participating, then the results are liable not to pertain to people who live in the environment on the right. There are other important questions that are sociome-based. Does the environment influence response to cancer immunotherapy? We are all very excited about cancer immunotherapy, but when do we take into account one's immune education throughout life in assessing the differences in response to immunotherapy among different people? We know that moving away from high crime areas results for some people in lower blood pressure if they had high blood pressure. But what are the biological and sociome predictors of who actually would benefit? To address this, Sam Volchenbaum and colleagues are creating a sociome data commons. Much so that these factors will be accessible to clinical researchers. Many of these data sets about the environment are geocoded, that is, they're able to be placed onto maps, and the relationships among them studied in relation to each other. For example, there are sensors that tell us about energy and traffic and where the parks are and the air quality, and we know what the crime is. And this is the distribution of some of those sensors across Chicago. And in fact, green space is probably a very important determinant of health. In fact, green space has been mapped in Chicago to the individual tree. These little lighter green dots are individual trees, and the coarser green bunches are how much is the net canopy. So at present, we are in the process of collecting a wide variety of data sets, some of which are shown here, and aggregating them and geocoding them in a way to make easily accessible to clinical investigators. And of course, we'll have to figure out how to help investigators actually use these sorts of data. Of course, all of this, it can be very sensitive, and we're going to do it with the advice of the Community Advisory and Review Council, the Patient Advisory Board, and the Industry Advisory Board, and of course, we'll make this public. I just want to give you one example of a cool thing that Ankur Bhargava produced for us, and Sandra Tillman. This is the relationship between higher median income, which is more pure green, and worse air quality, which is more pure blue. You can see that mostly areas are either pure blue or pure green. So the pure green means high income, good air quality, and the blue means lousy air quality and low income. You can see that they segregate pretty well together, separately. Finally, our goal is to create an ITM data commons ecosystem in which not only will we be able to have the sociome data commons, but we can combine that with clinical information from all the different institutions and from community partners, and be able to collaborate together in a way that Lainie is going to start telling us about right now.
Thank you, Julian. So I'm going to begin with talking about some of the new programs in ITM 3.0, and this one is called the ITM Navigator Network, which was created to provide researchers with a comprehensive set of services for team development, institutional navigation, and community engagement. So as you can see, in the blue, we have 6 site navigators. So there are the 6 main ITM partners and affiliate institutions. And in the maroon, we have 4 community navigators who are drawn from neighborhoods geographically across Chicagoland. And they're all led by a principal navigator who's in green. And the plan is for them to be meeting monthly and as needed to leverage the red side, which is our informatics-based LEAF and Profiles feasibility collaborator finder tool to speed study team formation and integration of community scientists, feasibility analysis, and recruitment, as well as study execution at multiple ITM sites. For those who have not used Profiles, it is an NIH-funded open source tool that helps identify researchers with similar interests or particular skills. LEAF is a web-based tool for querying and extracting de-identified cohorts across institutions so that researchers can determine if there are adequate potential participants to address particular research questions. So we have then the human and the computer interfaces to help navigate the stages in research that are critical for starting up a project and then for recruiting diverse participants. So here we have Raj Shah, who is an ITM Associate Director and the ITM Trial Recruitment Innovation Office, which stands for TRIO. And Raj is the CTSA, works closely with Sherry Robeson, a highly experienced clinical research professional who is TRIO's operation lead. And so as we talk about the TRIO, Sherry is the point person you're going to want to contact. So basically, the point of TRIO is a research support staff that includes experts in human-centered design, honest brokers, and research coordinators to help resolve vexing problems in recruitment and startup, often found in multi-site trials. Although initially in person, these studios were converted to Zoom meetings during COVID with broad and diverse participation. And during ITM 2.0, so in our last 5 years, one of the big questions that we wanted to analyze was how design science versus quality science led to solutions. And design science tended towards more systematic change in leadership positions, whereas quality science tended towards more communications and process and analytics. In translational science, we realized that a combination of tools is probably what we all want to be using. The focus in ITM 3.0 in the TRIO studios is going to be asking whether the addition of a sociome prism in the TRIO studio methodology, along with the community navigators with lived experience as participants, leads to more actionable solution concepts for diverse engagement in clinical research studies that are presented. And so here is a slide just looking at all the different changes from ITM 2.0 to ITM 3.0. On this slide, we wanted to talk about multiple new components of our ITM initiatives that we're going to, and I'll start with what we call the MIPS, which is the multi-institutional problem solving workshop approach. So MIPS attempts to address evolving regulatory issues in order to identify best practices for institutional implementation. We actually conducted one in our last cycle in January 2021. We were actually looking at e-consent, which became obviously very important during the COVID pandemic. And one of the things is it's not just by getting an electronic signature. There are a lot of other details in order to make sure it's HIPAA and regulatory compliant. It was led actually by Beth Martell and Lily Malachar and Les Cook, and led to a toolbox for researchers and IRB staff alike on how to approach these issues. And now we plan to hold during ITM 3.0 2 MIPS sessions annually. Our next one is actually on January 19th, 2023, and it's focused on how to achieve meaningful community engagement for research that requires community consultation. So some research requires community consultation. For example, if you want to do emergency-based research, some require community consultation just because in order to engage the community and encourage them to participate, you realize the importance of engaging the community early on. And so the title of that MIPS will be called Advancing Diverse Participation in Clinical Research, Moving Upstream of Recruitment. Registration is currently open, and you can contact Les Cook for more information. As I said, that one is being actually organized by Raj Shah and Les Cook with help from Santosh Basapur, Sherry Robertson, Natalie Woods, and Althea Steen. The next part, if we go from left to right, is the 360-degree services that we're going to be offering during ITM 3.0. So here, again, we're going to be increasing our focus on health equity, which requires greater consideration of the social determinants of health and other socio factors. And so to promote this type of research, we're prepared to provide 360-degree services. So for example, the Regulatory Knowledge Support and Ethics Group will be working with the BIRD, the Biostats, Epidemiology, and Research Design, and they will offer joint consultation to help researchers incorporate clinical and social data through seminars in which the team presents their challenges and practical solutions that will be proposed. That could also be done here in the ITM Grand Round setting. The next one that I'd like to talk about also on the 360 degrees is our geocoding. So most of the sociome data sets to be integrated in ITM 3.0 are geocoded, as you saw in some of the slides that Julian just showed. And this gives you data at sort of a much more individual level data which were unavailable. Usually, we used to previously use like zip code median income as a surrogate for household income. But fewer ITM investigators are familiar with newer approaches that incorporate spatial factors into investigations. And so we're going to be using our geospatial data analytics expertise, headed by John Schneider and Harold Pollock, are already doing one such project. And anyway, again, this project will be available to ITM investigators as a core, which means that you can get some partial funding to actually start to use this in order to get some preliminary data in order to apply for grants. As I've already mentioned, we have the, going back to the left on the bottom, we have the ITM Grand Rounds, of which this is the first, and it's going to provide a forum for further regular discussions around selection of sociome data sets and analytical tools. Interactions will be two-way, we're hoping, and both in person and by Zoom, in order to collect real-world data and to look at new methodologies that may impact the way we design our research studies. And finally, one of the new components that we've added to ITM 3.0 is the survey lab, which is now housed within the University of Chicago Biological Science Division's Public Health Services, and that began in around 2020. And this is a group that offers what they call a cafeteria-style approach to survey. So they can do the whole thing, but they could also offer to help you with parts of it, whether it's designing the study or helping you design your data collection sheets or actually helping you in the recruitment process. And so again, the whole purpose here is that to offer you either the whole package or discrete components that you might want help in. And again, that will be offered with some support through a core subsidy. One of the other programs that will be continuing actually from ITM 2.0 is our new normal. Sarah Saratelli, our award-winning communication director, is the new normal campaign director, and she has coordinated all three Chicagoland CTSAs to actually work on this Chicagoland-wide project, which is a comprehensive communication and connection platform that leverages evidence-based communication and behavioral science strategies and content to engage Chicagoans of all backgrounds, but especially younger adults, with the intention to promote lifelong research participation. There are creative elements. You may have seen some of the ads for Save the Humans, and the whole point, again, is to really increase participant interest, engagement, and then to make enrollment in research faster in order to speed up discoveries. And one of the things that she points out is that some of the research can actually be done at home, some of it needs to be done in clinics, but there's research for everybody and all types of studies. So from observational to intervention, from looking at COVID to looking at healthy individuals to looking at those with particular diseases. And you should feel free to sort of play on the website, to the new normal website, and see for yourself how easy and engaging it is to use. and even possibly become yourself a VIP or a very important participant and consider enrolling in a study or two. And so now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Josh, who will finish up our presentation.
Well, thank you very much, and I want to welcome you all to my home turf here, to our orthopedic building. This is the first time I've actually worn an N95 mask. So if I get hypoxic, Julian is right here to help rescue me. My wife has encouraged me to wear bigger and bigger masks. I think it's for cosmetic reasons, but that's another matter. Very important to the ITM activities is what we provide and opportunities we provide to our faculty in terms of pilot grants, other capabilities, access to regulatory services, and also access to the whole TIN network through the Network Capacity Cluster. In particular, the ITM pilot grants, I think, have been a very important part of ITM 2.0, which will continue in ITM 3.0. And it's been valuable in a number of ways from our faculty, going through the whole cycle of developing their grant, but in particular, this infusion of communication strategies. And working with Sarah Tell and her team, each of these of applicants, or at least the finalists, are invited to have a grant pitch video to learn scientific communications to a lay audience. So they present to our Community Advisory Council. And this is a very important skill that many translational scientists don't have. And by developing these skills, we think this is going to make our faculty much more effective in this regard. Also, new to ITM 3.0 is our focus on implementation science. We owe this to Elaine Moroto, who joined the ITM when she took the job as the Dean of the Parkinson School for Public Health at Loyola. And she came to us from the University of Colorado, where she was part of their CTSA and really is a national leader in implementation science. And Elaine, if you're out there, please excuse me as an orthopedic surgeon, a metallurgical engineer, for trying to describe implementation science. But it is really an exciting part of where we're going as an ITM 3.0. At the end of the day, the whole point of the CTSA program is to disseminate knowledge and to translate advancements in science to improvements in health. And what we find is there are barriers to doing so. It can take decades before the advancements that we have in our research labs and in our clinical research trials make it into improving public health. So this is a very formal way to address this. And in the process, 3 specific games were developed. The first has to do with knowledge, to support and nurture a D&I learning community and serve as a conduit for active local dissemination integration of D&I scientific knowledge from NIH and other organizations to the entire ITM audience of the academic and research partners. The second aim has to do with a stakeholder-centered design, which involves mobilization, catalyzation, intervention development, and a translational research that leverages designing for dissemination and sustainability methods. And finally, the third aim is an implementation scale-up aim that's going to deploy and implement tours and residence programs to provide mentorship to accelerate the scale-up of evidence-based interventions across the ITM and across Chicagoland. This cluster also gets the prize for the most tortured acronym that is possible. We call this the Renewable Energy Implementation Science Cluster Research Network with adaptome-based learning methods and education for dissemination and implementation research for greater health equity. But embedded within this is this important concept of the adaptome, which was certainly new to me and maybe to some others here. And so in what Elaine Moroto has taught us is that the leading NIH D&I researchers introduced this adaptome construct as a means for advancing the science of adaptation and for characterizing the relationship between adaptation and intervention effectiveness. In other words, the fit between the interventions and their settings. The adaptone is a means for visualizing, institutionalizing, and sharing generalizable learning of the common implementation settings in order to characterize common themes and common barriers and provide a living implementation roadmap or starting logic model. So this is a ambitious part and a new cluster, and we're very excited to include this in ITM 3.0. Of course, our renewable energy can interact very closely with our community cluster, the so-called ENGINE community, a slightly less tortured acronym, enabling the next generation of interdisciplinary engagement, which in our community and collaboration cluster, the idea is a co-creation of prioritized research projects where we work actively with the community to help them identify, we can help each other identify the areas that are most in need of translational research. Also within this cluster is the I-Core at NCATS. This is a program initially in National Science Foundation, NSF, as a mechanism to translate the new scientific findings, translate them into products, and going through the whole entrepreneurial cycle. This is adapted somewhat to translational research, so that where the end product isn't necessarily a new company or a new device, but actually an idea, and how to implement that idea based on who is the customer, what is the solution, and who are they. So these I-Core teams have started to form. We had our first cycle last year, we have a cycle now, and this is a way for us to educate our translational workforce into how to further and more effectively disseminate their ideas so that there can be true advancements in health. Education clearly is a very key component of ITM 3.0, as it has been throughout the ITM cycle. We have a very vibrant KL2 program. Currently, the PIs are Eric Beyer, who's been the PI for the last 3 cycles of the grant, but also this year and this cycle, we're adding Lisa Barnes from the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Welcome, Lisa. This is a wonderful opportunity for our junior faculty to really get trained up in translational science to make them independent practitioners. There have been many, many successes in this program. Many of these individuals that have completed the program have gone on to achieve their own independent grant funding, R01s, and leadership positions. So this will continue, obviously, in ITM 3.0, and I think we have additional slots than we had previously. This is an example of the K-Scholar community interacting throughout the ITM, and also there's a Chicagoland-wide K program, so-called K-Day, where all 3 Chicagoland CTSAs participate. We also have a very vibrant TL1 program, and this is for postdocs. And what we aim to do is to educate them in these core competencies, which is called ECRIPTIC, the Enhancing Clinical Research Professionals Training and Qualifications Competency Domains. And you can see from the outer ring some of these basic competencies, including communications, clinical study operations, et cetera. I'm not going to go through each and every one of them. But what's important on this slide is to see how we've adapted this curriculum in ITM 3.0 specifically for health equity concerns. And you can see, and we can circulate these slides later to show exactly what we've done, but this is how we're going to really give a health equity focus to our TL1 trainees. And this is a conceptual program for the TL1 trainee. These are typically individuals with a clinical doctoral degree, such as an MD, a DO, PharmD, DNP, PhD, or a joint degree. They apply to our training program in clinical research, biomedical informatics, and health equity. We select the trainees from our applicant pool, and then they can go down one of these 3 paths. I'm not going to go over this in great detail, either getting a master's in clinical research, bioinformatics, or public health from 3 of our institutions. And at the end of the day, we want to produce trainees who have skills for successful career in translational research, who can successfully compete for mentored career development awards, such as the K Award, and other fellowships. again, the goal is for these to be independent translational researchers. New to the ITM 3.0 is also a very rigorous process for evaluation. And is that you, Julie, in the back? I can't tell. That is you. Okay, I'm used to it. Julie Darnell from Loyola, thank you for joining us today, is our evaluation coordinator and sits on ITM Central. And with her help, each of the clusters has developed a so-called logic model, where there are inputs to each cluster, activities, outputs, and then short-term outcomes, intermediate and long-term outcomes that we could all try to measure to quantify how effective are our programs. Again, evaluation is key to determine whether we're meeting the goals of the ITM, and this is a discipline I think it's far more rigorous in ITM 3.0 than it has been previously. We've introduced, with Julie's help, this Net Promoter Score as a way to quantify the quality and the responsiveness of our programs. And as you can see, this is something you're all used to getting when you take the United Airlines flight or go to Walmart or what have you. You get these things, you automatically delete them. But what we hope for those in our that are participating in our ITM activities, that we get a really honest feedback so that we can make sure the programs we're delivering are effective and can be improved where needed. It's already been alluded to that we are part of a much larger network of 6 CTSA institutions throughout the country. But I think in Chicago, we have done something that is quite unique. I don't think any other large cities, or small cities for that matter, have developed such a productive working relationship with the local CTSAs. We regularly meet with the leaders of the UIC and the Northwestern CTSAs, and we have a number of common programs. The first of which is actually fairly unique as well. The 3 CTSAs have pooled their resources, and we've hired a research liaison who works at the Chicago Department of Public Health. That's Rochelle Paul Brutus. So that, number one, we have a great link between our programs and the Chicago Department of Public Health to make sure our priorities are in sync. But number two, to hopefully make the Chicago Department of Public Health aware of all the academic community has to offer to help them achieve their goals. We have a number of educational opportunities that are common between the 3 CTSAs, including this Equator Conference, where we educate the translational workforce on ways to do research more efficiently and effectively, the citywide K-Day that I mentioned previously, and also the New Normal campaign that Lainie discussed. That's a platform we borrowed from the University of Michigan that has been used now by all 3 of the Chicago CTSAs to provide in one place for a patient interested in the clinical trial access to clinical trials throughout Chicagoland. So we think this is also a very worthwhile campaign. So get the latest in ITM opportunities in your inbox, sign up for the ITM newsletter. And I want to thank each and every one of you for your engagement and for attending our first ITM Grand Rounds. Now, what we hope for is a robust discussion, questions, comments, input, and critiques.
Gary, can the Zoom audience also participate?
They can participate, and also if you're going to ask a question or make a comment, please use one of the microphones. That way our Zoom audience can hear. Otherwise, they can't, and we have to repeat what you have to say. I won't be bashful. I'll call on some of you if we don't have any.
We've had a number of people ask in the chat about the ITM newsletter and signing up and getting more information from the ITM. The ITM website is very easy to remember. There is a QR code for those of you who are in the room. Feel free to sign up. And for those of you from home.
Sarah?
There is also social media where you can follow us at Chicago ITM across all platforms. Enjoy.
Raj, if I can put you on the spot here, maybe you can describe a little bit of the activities you have planned in the network capacity cluster and ITM 3.0. I think that was a particularly productive part of ITM 2.0. I know you and Santosh and others have published studies looking at a design approach to clinical research trials. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, and thanks for the presentation about launching ITM grant rounds today. It's good to see our colleagues from other institutions join us today in the room and hopefully online. Our work continues with the ITM studios. So these are once a month, the first Wednesday of the month, usually from 8 to 10. Where we have individuals present their research studies that they've been working on, where they might be having some complexities around recruitment, especially diverse recruitment. We've been working a lot in the background over the last year to rethink our what we learned in the first part of doing about 40 studios, about how to get better answers and potential solution sets that encourage diverse ideas and participation. So we've added some components to really work before the actual studio happens, to work with the presenters on what to expect and what they need to do. And then as we have the studio itself, we're going to add some more components around health equity pauses to discuss issues in our design methods as our lens, our initial sociome prism lens or prism. And then post, we follow with individuals to see how they're doing in their activities and what ideas they've taken and adapted. We actually write these reports. We put them in a wiki page that people can access. They become publicly accessible. So individuals can learn from each other based on ideas and concepts. So I think our first test run at this is planned for November in the first week on a Wednesday. So we encourage, we'll send out reminders, but encourage people to attend because we always get like really interesting topics and we work through solutions together. So thank you. If I could ask a question, just for the group as a whole, it's great that we're thinking about, the ITM grand rounds as a way for all of us to get to know each other and to engage. And I know it's a challenge when you're dealing with 5 institutions and multiple departments at each institution, but just how do we kind of think as a group to keep encouraging more people in our translational sciences pathways at our centers to know about the ITM, to engage with the ITM, to realize its resources?
Yeah, so, or restated, we all know what's going on at Yale, but we don't know what's going on around the corner. Sarah.
I think that's an excellent point. And research shows one of the best methods of transmitting information, most effective, is word of mouth marketing. So for everybody in this room and everybody online who found something that they found exciting in the presentations today, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to tell 3 people about the ITM and what you think they could benefit from, and invite them to our next grand rounds, which will be held on November 18th. Also, save the date November 16th for some other get-together information you'll be receiving. Sign up at the QR code there for the ITM newsletter to get all of this in your inbox so you can save that. The point is to build community. And so when you are bringing somebody into the ITM fold and family, the great thing with Grand Rounds is we have the opportunity to welcome everybody in person once we've all been stuck online for the last 3 years. And so there's a different element and an energy with building those relationships, and we're excited to have that moving into this next era. We have a request for a repeat of our social media tag. It is at Chicago ITM. You can also find all of our social media channels that send information, updates, events, all the things that you and your folks could be interested in on the website. At the bottom, there's a feed. And when there are things going on that you would like to share, please feel free to send an email to us and we'll be happy to get the word out. Myself, the wonderful Gosha Labno in this room, and others that we're bringing on board to help get more of that information out to your site. Back to our wonderful PIs and this room for any other
While
questions.
you've got the microphone, I wonder if you can tell us about some of the wins in the New Normal campaign.
Yes, happy to. Thank you, Josh. So the New Normal campaign, as you saw, is a great platform to increase awareness of and participation in health research. Why it's so beneficial for researchers is that you don't have to have a multi-million-dollar budget to take advantage of ads and things to bring people into the fold. It is literally like a Match.com for health research studies. And we have thousands of people who have signed up, said, I want to do research, connect me with things in these disease areas. And once your studies are in there, you can sync and have them filtered to match based on the inclusion-exclusion criteria of your studies. So we've done some really cool things. Obviously, we've gotten some national awards, which are great, but the big excitement is when we help decrease recruitment times for our researchers. So Phil Held, you may know, as one of your Resch colleagues, has gotten a lot of folks into his studies. There are other folks. Right now we have, as I said, thousands of people registered who want to do research. So if you're interested in getting your study in that platform, please feel free to send me an email, Serritella, SERRITELLA, @uchicago.edu. And we'll be happy to fast track that in. Also, if you go to bethenewnormal.org and you go to submit your study, there are specific instructions for each institution, which are tailored to your IRB offices and unique requirements. And we'll get those streamlined so that you can connect with people while you're doing other things like your research, coming back from your coffee break, getting an alert. So that's a high-level overview there. Thanks, Josh.
Sarah?
Yeah.
Sandra?
Oh, yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So I was really excited about the menu of assistance that you're giving to the researchers. Of course, I'm a nerd, so I'm especially interested in the geocoding part. I was excited that Don Snyder and Harold Pollack are taking part in that. I was just wondering about the ability to geocode PHI. Is that part of the geocoding assistance we're giving, or should I just ask that? Because it's a detail. I'm not sure if you know that level of detail.
Personal health information, PHI. Yes, of course, when we actually apply the sociome data commons contained data to clinical studies that are about individuals, for example, as we're doing in the pilot that you're involved in trying to figure out the interaction between sociome and outcomes in pediatric asthma. Clearly, we have to know not all children and where they live, but each individual child and where do they live and where do they go to school. Because of that, these exposures, as I showed you, for example, on the map, are very hyperlocal. Perhaps we could, with these data, design studies like, can you improve a child's asthma outcome by changing the route that they walk home as to avoid exposure to high PM 2.5 particulate matter because they're walking near a highway. And if you route them instead through a more green space, does that improve their asthma outcome? Just with that as the only intervention. Of course, one needs to know who's the individual being studied. So yes, ultimately PHI will be involved.
With a grain of salt.
Yeah, for sure.
And I say that just because it raises big regulatory and privacy issues, and so there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to be able to do as seamless integration as being proposed.
And Lainie, would you all be willing to ask all the researchers who here has ever geocoded their own PHI?
Anyone? Anybody geocoded their own PHI?
As individuals or
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're asking, Sandra.
Oh, sure. I was just wondering about the availability. If you have someone in your group who can do it for you, I guess that counts. But what is your availability for having PHI geocoded to latitude, longitude, to census block, census tract, what have you?
You mean individual patients?
Well, yeah, so individual patients and
Or-
each researcher, if they have that capability or not.
Yes. So,
There's one.
I said patients, but I meant
Yeah,
participants.
some of this was done as part of a PCORI grant called Capricorn, the Chicago Area Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Network, with 10 institutions for various projects. So technical skills are within our institutions that have done this, so it exists.
I used to run PCORI queries, but I don't remember any geocoding in the PCORI
yeah,
queries.
there have been some that have been run and have been used in certain studies with protections.
So, I wanted to, and we're getting close to the end of the hour, but I just wanted to respond to Raj's his challenge about how do we educate other members of our faculty and make more of ITM. I think this is really important because I know in some of the rounds of our pilot funding, we've had less response than others. We really need to get the message out that the programs that the ITM offer can be career transformative to young researchers. Some of the pilot programs, K Awards, T Awards. Norma Sandoval, who's standing in the back, runs the Rush Research newsletter, sends it out, and I think we have much better communication between ITM and Norma to get the word out more to Rush investigators. So this remains a challenge, and I think it's something we really do have to focus on in ITM 3.0, because there's really a lot of value for our faculty members in the programs that we offer. And so we just have to get that word out.
And to that point, Josh, with everyone in this room and on the line, if you have regular meetings where people attend, that a simple embedding and highlight of resources would be beneficial, we are more than happy to take this show on the road. Some feedback we've gotten from faculty are great. Sometimes they don't always see the newsletters, but if we were to show up and be at a certain regular standing meeting that they've had, that could be helpful. So that is another option and something we're happy to do for everybody.
So on that note, we just want to say thank you to all of you for coming, and this is the beginning of a new series of ITM Grand Rounds, and please join us for some snacks in the back.
Thank you. One more.